Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Coaches Roundtable. It's got to be at least somewhere between 6 and 10 now. Excited to have you guys back on here and to chat. It's been, I think, a couple months, so I'm sure we got a lot to catch up on. So let's dive into it. I'll let Brandon, I'll let you start, man. Anything been going on in the last couple months on your end?
Yeah, man. Everything as a whole has been going great on my end. I think this actually will probably be the first one that we have that's officially in the summer, but by the time this gets out, summer will be done. But as a whole, as far as coaching, like the business is concerned, this has been by far the most productive summer season that I've had on the business front, which has been a blessing because I'm sure you guys do as well. I coach other coaches. I speak and interact with many other coaches. And what I've always heard prior to this, now keep in mind, guys, I've been coaching for 10 years at this point, but this is the first full summer that I've been on my own, all in on my nutrition coaching business because every other year before, I still had my corporate job within the sports nutrition industry. So this has been the first summer that I've had full board, but most of the summers before, people would tell me, oh, it always gets slow during the summer, but I'm blessed to say that business hasn't slowed down at all. I've just continued to see growth. So that's been a blessing first and foremost. And then we always do a recap on our training. That's something that actually we haven't caught up on in quite some time. So right now, in terms of my training, I'm currently in the second mesocycle of a delt specialization cycle that I'm running this block where I'm specifically looking to bring up my side delts. So I know some people out there, they're like, oh man, that's one small muscle, but I've been training 17 years at this point. I really got to get specialized if I'm trying to bring something up and really allocate more of my volume budget, as well as my recovery and adaptive resources towards that. And one thing that I'm doing a little bit differently this phase specifically is I'm biasing the lengthened portion of all of my side delt movements, because obviously we know with most side delt exercises, we are not getting tension through that lengthened phase, especially dumbbell exercises, machine exercises, things of that sort. So what I've done is I've switched up all my lateral delt movements that I was doing with dumbbells or with machines to all cable variations. So I'm hitting delts 4 times per week. So I'm utilizing an increased frequency as well as I've increased my volume across the week in totality. But I'm doing 2 days where I'm doing wrist height cable laterals, and then other days where I'm doing behind the back cable laterals. So these are going to allow for greater tension in that stretch position. And I'll tell you, it's been surprising because I'm sure you guys can relate to this, and many of the audience out there. I have not gotten side delt soreness probably since I first started training, since I initially got like that muscle damage when I first did my first side delt raise, essentially. But it's really been a productive phase. I've titrated my volume at this point up to 20 working sets per week on side delts. So I'm getting a really robust stimulus first and foremost on the side delts. And then also I'm utilizing an increased frequency. Obviously, I'm biasing more that lengthened position. And I'm getting a bit more disruption within my training. And with this frequency and volume, this whole combination, it's been really productive thus far. And also, I just have to say, I've had some of my clients ask me, like, have you noticed growth? Like, dude, I'm 17 years into training. Muscle growth is such a slow process, first and foremost. However, I will say that I'm not someone that I don't need novelty. I'm a very routine and structure oriented individual. I can literally run the same program for 6, 8, 9 months and not care. As long as I'm seeing progress in terms of progressive overload, being able to over time see more rep progression, see more load progression, whatever it may be, I'm fine. I can do the monotonous stuff. I come from a bodybuilding background. Like when I first started prepping, I was eating 6 of the same meals every single day. And I'm not saying I would never advise someone to do that, but I did it because that's what gave me results in that moment. But I think that what's really been interesting about some of the research that has come out as of late is some of these more nuanced approaches, some of the lengthened bias movements, or just the stretch under load or the stretch mediated hypertrophy. And it's just something that like more exciting. It's nice to have something new to incorporate into my training and just it's just a little bit of novelty where you're excited to try something to experiment. I'm really big into experimentation at this point in my training career because I know that it's not like I'm going to have astronomical growth. However, it is something that I could see how it affects me as an advanced trainee. And then I'm utilizing it with intermediate or clients that have much less experience than me, and they're getting much greater growth. So I know it's effective, but it is also just something that's stimulative, both in terms of the gym and then out of it, just from a mental perspective. As a whole, summer has been going great, and I'm glad to be back on the mic with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I agree. I love the cable height lateral raises. Like you said, it's super interesting that like you can get like sore or like you haven't really had too much soreness, but now you're implementing that. And then like you realize, damn, I probably haven't been doing a lot of this in terms of my delts and stuff like that. Super interesting that even somebody like you that's been training for so long, it's just changing that up a little bit. I'm not sure how often you did those before. It's interesting that just that small change can make a difference.
So to be honest with you, previously I was doing 3 sets of cable lateral variations. So that was 3 out of, I would generally train delts between my side delts in particular, between 6 and 9 sets. So I might have taken up a third of my volume. Now I've titrated this up to 20 sets per week, and I'm only doing lengthened variations. I'm also doing partials once I hit failure in in a full repetition or a full range of motion. So it is something that has been quite different. And also it's something that I've enjoyed. You know what I mean? It's been nice. I'm not someone that ever has gotten attached to movements. When I was in college, I came from a football background. I really wanted to bench press a lot of weight and stuff. Like I was attached at that point in my life. At this point, like as soon as I had a knee reconstruction in college, as soon as I had that injury, I was like, all right, squat, bench, all these things. Like I'm going for physique and really transition my focus. Since the time I'm 20 years old, I've only focused on hypertrophy. And so I've never gotten attached to movements. I don't have that type of, I'm really someone that I'm not scared to be wrong about something. So if I see evidence that goes against or that is contrary to what I think, I'm always willing to take it on if it is substantiated. So initially we see one study, the Pedrosa study comes out in 2020. It's like, all right, partials in the bottom range of a leg extension. Most of us don't have access to a leg extension that's really going to bias that length of position. Should I try that? All right, if it fits within my programming, and if I could do it at the end of a set, or if I can find a machine where I can actually get into a lengthened position. We keep getting more and more evidence. At this point, we have 4 or 5 studies that show a benefit to lengthened partials over either full range of motion or over especially a shortened overloaded partial position. And so at this point, we have enough evidence. It's something Jeff, you were with me. I asked Dr. Scott Stevenson. I had already been doing lengthened movements, but all I had been doing was lengthened partials. So at that time, you and I went to the Physique Education Collective in June of 2022. At that point, I was 6 months into this experiment, and I was doing lengthened movements. And I actually took one of my clients, IFBB Pro Anthony Scalza, when we were down there, and we did at the end of all of our short overload movements, we did lengthened partials. But at that time, I was only doing lengthened partials, say the last set of an exercise. At this point, I've incorporated it more frequently. I've incorporated it for more weeks. In the past, I would only do it, say, the last week or two of a mesocycle. I've incorporated even more frequently, even within Jeremiah's programming. We're incorporating more lengthened partials earlier on in a phase and really pushing, especially in the shortened overload movements, really pushing that as a way to increase just the stimulus of our training.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's cool. It seems like it's really picking up, and it seems like most people are adopting the lengthened partials. Like you said, I remember when the first study came out, the Pedrosa one, and I remember Dr. Mike Israel talked about it, and he's, oh, it's just one study. And now since then, I feel like it's just been on a heater with these lengthened partials. Yeah, cool. Jeremiah, what about you, man? How's things going on your end?
Yeah, it's been a good summer of mine as well. Man, not too much to report. Just got done training, actually, so I'm still hella sweaty. It's beautiful in my garage in Arizona at 1 p.m. for a lower body session, but it was honestly a great one. Super productive last phase of building here with Brandon. We just got off a deload week, just got back into it. Again, I just finished lower body. I'm really happy with where I was at. Like my 2 RIR work this week was really where I ended 2 weeks ago for 0 RIR, at least for my leg press and for a lot of my movements. So I was stoked with that. And again, I feel like it was a pretty productive mesocycle. As he said, we were pushing pretty hard there. A lot of lengthened partials for, I think, all of my short overload movements we had. The last set was lengthened partials, which I really enjoyed those. I feel like that even for me has been such a good implementing those. We've really implemented those through this entire year, but that for me has been such a good learning experience with my short and overload movements, as far as how much more I can still squeeze out of things. For a long time, I was just trying to standardize it with the, hey, we should have a start point and then an end point to every movement, and it doesn't count as a rep if we don't hit those 2 points. And that's been great. I've really enjoyed that, especially for so many of my chest focused movements, like my chest flies, my cable chest presses. I'm just so productive. So leg extensions too are when I really enjoy those on. So yeah, man, I feel like training has been super productive. What I think next week our plan is to start some fat loss for the wedding. I think I'm gonna have to get refitted for my suit.
That's a fact.
I got a custom made suit, man, back in March. And I think that the building phase went too well. I don't think I'm much fatter than I was then, but I don't think I'm going to fit in that. So we're going to have to probably get refitted for that. So we're cutting it a little close there, but I wouldn't want it any other way. So that's what's been up on my end.
So did you do like a specialization too? Or like where specifically are you like, all right, it's going to be tighter at?
I think my lower body has honestly been, that's where I really noticed like my shorts and everything fit quite a bit differently. We did chest and bicep specialization there for a while. And this last mesocycle specifically, which I think has by far been the most productive one we've had, we just took a more balanced approach. There are a lot of things that we, like from the first meso, the building phase, it was like, hey, here's a lot of areas where I think I can do better, be more productive, manage this better going forward. So yeah, but we'll see. Maybe I won't have actually made any gains once we cut things down, but hoping so.
I feel like always when you're in a building phase and like towards the top of it, I feel like you always ask yourself like, all right, have I even made any progress? And it's just even that little bit of body fat, I feel can mask some things. And it's hard. I'm sure you guys have to deal with that with your clients all the time too, talking them down when you get in those building phases. I know I've gone through that multiple times where I'm like, man, am I even making any progress in this building phase? But it's just like, you just have a little bit more body fat on you. So it's just tougher to actually see that. And then once you start cutting, it's okay, there it is.
Yeah, I think so many people shoot themselves in the foot there too by changing their movements up so often. Where that's like in our building phase, man, since January, so many of our movements have been exactly the same thing. So I have so much tangible evidence to look at as far as, man, I'm so much stronger on these movements versus where I was in January. And I think so many people shoot themselves in the foot with that, where it's like, I've had so many people tell me, hey, I'm advanced. So I adapt super quickly because like after 4 to 6 weeks, I really start to progress slowly on movements. And no, that's
everyone.
That's
all
neural,
of us.
right. You got past that period of neural adaptation. What you're feeling now is like what it actually feels like to train for muscle growth. We're like just actually getting to the point where you're starting to build. It's not just you're adapted, but yeah, I think that's one very beneficial thing to have in a building phase. But if you're changing shit up too frequently, absolutely, I think that's what kills most people there.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think one thing that I could say specifically about Jeremiah is we had done multiple chest specialization cycles. We did chest and arms. And essentially throughout that, we really, first of all, he nailed his execution, especially on pushing movements. We really got that down, especially in terms of not only executing, because he has great movement proficiency, his ability to follow through with an exercise and really execute it properly from a biomechanics perspective is on point. However, we were seeing, and this was something, I remember I said one thing to him and this wasn't even an ego check or something. You sent me a video and I was like, you got more, like without a shadow of a doubt. And you were like, you think so? And week after week, we saw that. So just his ability to tap in and realize, yes, I have extra gas in the tank. Let me take it to the house. Really, his ability, when I look at videos of Jeremiah now compared to 6 months ago of his training videos, his ability just to get tapped in, locked in, not only from a physical perspective, but especially from a mental perspective. And this goes beyond the training programming. This goes beyond the conversations between him and I. It goes in multiple realms, but it was like us speaking about literally just locking down. You put apps on your phone to really, you put it in your calendar. You had blocked out times for training. It was a mental approach to it. It was a physical approach. It was a programming approach. And then we built up momentum throughout that chest specialization cycle. And when we decided to take a more holistic or more balanced approach, we obviously brought down the volume because at one time we were titrating up volume for chest. With that, you're getting more of a robust stimulus on your chest and less of a stimulus on other muscle groups. But now we're using a more balanced approach where we're allocating the volume budget, except for his legs. I still haven't titrated up the volume on his legs. It's still at like essentially what I would consider a maintenance volume because he's been so responsive to leg training just from even a minimum effective volume perspective. However, within his chest training, we're not pushing things up from a volume perspective as much as we were in prior phases. However, the adaptations that he made in prior phases have subsequently essentially transitioned into this one. For instance, one of the greatest improvements he's made has been on an incline Smith machine press. So I believe, Jeremiah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like your working sets were 195 on the incline Smith. And at this point, 6 or 9 months later, we're at 225 for working sets. So we're not only seeing tangible increases in load in one set, we're seeing it across working sets. And that's really, if you look into like James Krieger has done great work on weightology about this, the best way to assess hypertrophy, other than from a cross-sectional area, other than a muscle biopsy, other than sticking Jeremiah in an ultrasound unit or an MRI or one of those things, which none of us have access to, is really to see improvements in performance in hypertrophy rep ranges across sets on movements that you're already neurally adapted to. So you are already proficient in. It isn't a new movement that all of a sudden you've made newbie gains in. It's movements like our incline Smith machine press, which we've been beating into the ground for 6, 7, 8 months, and you're continuing to improve. Now, are you making jumps and leaps like someone that just started this movement? No, but 30 pounds, whether it be over 6 or 8 months, that's a substantial improvement in strength, especially in context to the fact that your execution has stayed spot on, your ability to push towards those lower RIRs, really hit failure and go beyond at certain points when we've utilized in other shortened overload movements where we've went beyond failure by utilizing lengthened partials. All of that has conspired into progress. So I'm really looking forward to, us starting your fat loss phase next week, getting you somewhat shredded for a wedding, because I'm not getting you drawn in and like we were in our last photo shoot, but I am going to have you, chiseled for Katie, to say the least. But I'm looking forward to it and just going through another successful phase together, especially from a physical and a mental perspective, because with every phase that we do together, you grow and progress not only as a physical, person or as a coach or as a client, you also do as a man, as a business person, as well as a leader. So it's that two-pronged approach. This isn't about physique transformation. This is about lifestyle transformation.
Absolutely. I think the last thing there, like one of the biggest things for me in this like last 4 or 5 months has also been the form videos, where before I wasn't sending you as many. And that was one of the things we talked about as well, where I'm going to send you every week at least these 3 videos. And for me, it's every week, it's the movements that I'm like afraid of the most. So it's for me, like I have that Cybex squat press to where that thing doesn't have any safety at all. So that the foot plate comes within 8 inches of the back pad if you fail on it. It's honestly terrifying to fail on. So like that one every week, the pendulum squat every week. And then it's normally one of my chest movements every week, because that's not, for me, that's not like mentally that taxing, but it's just, I feel like that's where it's easiest for me to let my technique slip up or not take it there, especially if it's like a lengthened partial movement. So every week sending those over, just like I tell my clients. And that's for me also, I think sending that to you, because I know if I send that to you, I don't want you to like, man, you're not pushing as hard. And also just like sharing those videos on Instagram for me is great accountability, because I know every week there's at least 15 clients that I'm telling, hey, you still have 5 more reps here. And I can't be doing the exact same thing and sharing that if I'm telling my clients they got to push harder. So honestly, for me, I think that's been a huge piece of it as well. But that's all I have to say about myself for today.
Yeah, no, those
Jeff, catch us up.
Real quick, I was just going to hit on a couple things. I think the form videos are super important. Like you said, it is the ones that you don't want to like do it to that are the best. Cause I feel like if you're not taking those form videos every once in a while, it can be easy to either, like you said, I feel like both ends of the extreme, where it's like one end, it's like your form starts to break down. It's you're cheating reps a little bit there. You're like, damn, okay, I could definitely improve my technique there. But then also, you said also not pushing yourself hard enough, like checking that as well too, and seeing what that looks like. I think it's super helpful to be able to see that. And we've all been doing this for years, and we still take form videos, and it's super important to do that to double check it. But yeah, Brandon, as you were talking about changing up exercises with Jeremiah's incline Smith, I think it was incline Smith, makes sense. A lot of, like you said too, Jeremiah, makes sense that a lot of people screw themselves over for building muscle when they do switch things up all the time, because then it's like you said, you don't know you could still make progress that way, but it just gets a little bit tougher to know for sure if you're actually progressing. It's almost if you're in a fat loss phase, you're doing like a super, if it fits your macros approach, it's like you're like going out to eat all the time, right? It's you can make it work, but it's just going to be a little bit tougher there. And like click for me there. So I just wanted to say that. But as far as things on my end, same thing. I think Jeremiah, I think you got like a month before me before the wedding. So I have November 11th. So I'm about 2.5 months out. So I started a fat loss phase probably a month or a little over a month and a half ago. And so I've just been doing that. My goal is to give myself 4 weeks before the wedding to like fill it back out a little bit, because Brandon, same thing you said, you're in a suit and a tux. So that's not the place to be like super shredded. I feel like you don't want to be super shredded, because then you just look like skinny and deplete it. And that's not where you want to be. So I'm giving myself 4 weeks there to just eat back up. And I've always found that like after photo shoots or bodybuilding competitions, that like 4 weeks after is like your best physique. I feel like, do you guys feel that way too? Like you just are a little bit fuller and you just, I don't know. It's like you're fuller. You're maybe not as shredded, but like you're just fuller. And I just feel like more muscular during that time. I don't know if you guys, both of you are giving me that eye. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that's,
I'll tell you my experience. I have a 2-week window. So actually what I do, and I actually do a 2-week buffer with all my clients. Jeremiah knows this because we just had this discussion yesterday in terms of his fat loss phase. Generally what I've seen with myself as well as many of my clients, and I even put this into contest prep, actually coaching at this point, because I've seen it be so successful, is I'll get someone into whether it be stage shape or photo shoot condition or whatever it may be. And throughout the course, the latter half, if we're going really into stage condition, I'm talking getting peeled. The last 2 weeks, I'm really just focusing on lowering systemic stress, dropping off fatigue, and eating up into the show, essentially. So I could get someone used to reassimilating more carbohydrates, having more food volume, all these things, and also making sure that we're pulling off all that sympathetic stress that comes from the diet, from the supplementation, the high stimulant intake, the high cardio, all the factors that go into that allostatic bucket, fill up your stress bucket, essentially. So I found that to be the best with competitors, but even with lifestyle clients, because we give that 2-week buffering room. And here's the thing, when I have just a client that's doing a fat loss phase, say that our goal is to get to, and it's not a clear-cut goal, but we have a 16-week fat loss phase. I always tell them, or they wanted a 12-week fat loss phase. I'll tell them, listen, we're going to do a 14-week fat loss phase. I'm going to put 2 weeks of buffer, because yes, I can backcast your progression. However, what happens if the kids get sick, or something happens at work where you have to go into work the whole week. Or for instance, I have a client out in Canada. They've had forest fires. So he's actually supposed to move, and he's in the process where he's like with his hands up in the air, not knowing whether he's going to be able to relocate, which is 2 hours away, or he's going to have to stay and extend his lease for a place that he already gotten off of. So super high stress. And we have all these other factors that we have to consider. Yes, it would be great if we could project and really just put out and say in 12 weeks I'm going to be shredded. But I'll tell you, I've been on stage 15 times. I've done over 100 photo shoots. Very rare, or honestly, to be honest with you, it never happens perfectly. So we always have to take that into consideration. So I like a 2-week buffering room, and I've noticed for myself, whether it be if I finish a contest prep in terms of like my timeline, say I have a show the second week of September, and I finished my diet in terms of being at my least or my most depleted state the end of August. Those last 2 weeks, I'm really able to drop off fatigue, really revitalize. I come back to life, both in terms of muscular fullness, in terms of my pumps in the gym. I just feel better. And then also what I do, whether it be a photo shoot or I go on stage, or even if I'm just getting ready for a vacation, like I feel so much better that I'm in the mood, I'm in the moment, I'm able to enjoy myself. So I find 2 weeks, but we go a little bit over that. The only person I'll tell you, Anthony Scalza, can hold condition for 6 to 8 weeks. One of my clients, it's incredible. He looks better sometimes, like 6 to 8 weeks after a show, and I'm hitting up with 250 or 300 carbs more than his dieting carbs or his dieting calories. It's phenomenal. But I will say, for most individuals, they have about a 2-week buffer room before they start spilling. And obviously, as we know, if you get super lean, we want to gain fat after. We want to get into a more recovered state where we're starting to restore hormone profiles. We're starting to get ourselves out of that catabolic state of being in a deficit. So it makes sense that you have some room to play with, but generally, I haven't seen many people continue to look better week on week for more than 2-3 weeks at most.
Yeah, so let me rephrase that. I wasn't necessarily saying that I'm expecting to look better. I was just trying to, my goal was to fill back out. And again, I know I'm not going to be as lean as I was when I ended the diet, and that's fine. That's what I'm okay. Like, I knew that going in. That was my goal. And kind of things you hit on, it was like, I wanted to lower stress. I feel like the 4 weeks ahead of time is going to probably be just a lot of small stuff going on. And so just making sure that I'm in the headspace for that, not feeling like I need a diet during that period of time. And like you said, just give myself potentially, if I needed it, a couple more weeks as well, which right now I'm ahead of schedule. So I don't think I'll need it. But as the leaner you get, the more weight you lose, it gets tougher. I'm just taking this period of time to be like, all right, let's just take the extra loss per week and run with it and whatnot. But yeah, no, it wasn't like you said. I guess a couple weeks after, you still aren't necessarily like, you haven't put on a ton of body fat, but you just feel fuller. And so maybe I extended that too far. But yeah, no, I definitely don't think I'm going to be like leaner or anything by the 4 weeks. But again, that's not my goal during that period of time. Yeah, that's what I'm doing from that standpoint. Just because, yeah, I don't want to look super, super lean and like my face drawn in and whatnot.
To think that much about also going into your wedding. I feel like other people listening to this, we were talking about our last team meetup. Natalie and Andrea were like joking about, oh yeah, you and Brandon are probably going to run a peak week before you're wedding, the peak you did that, which was just so funny to me to think about, because that's like, yeah, honestly, I would be close to it. And then Brandon, your comment, oh wow, something about delivering a speech at 1.5 speed for my wedding was the funniest thing.
Dude, no one would speak faster than I would, but I would get a lot of value within. If you gave me a 10-minute time configuration, I'd make the most out of it.
Oh yeah, there'd be like a quick physique update in there, and then I was telling Katie about that the other day. Just that was like the funniest comment I've seen in so long. But anyways, I'm sorry to interrupt you, dude. Go on.
Oh no, you're good. I love the banter. Yeah, no, it is a lot. I feel like to go into a wedding, but I feel like a lot of the stuff we talk about is probably maybe a little bit over the extreme. But hey, we love it, and that's what we do this for.
Look big in that suit.
Got to look big in the suit. But yeah, so that's my goal there. And then we're going to go on our honeymoon right after. So that's the other thing too, is I want to make sure that I'm like, again, fairly lean for that. Plus for me, it just had been a long time. Jeremiah, since we did my photo shoot, was really the last time I ran like a cut.
That was when you got engaged, wasn't it?
Yeah, like right before.
So like a 3-year engagement.
It's definitely felt that way. It's been about a year.
Seems like that's been forever ago.
It's almost been a year and a half. It will be a year and a half by the time But it was like end of April 2022 was when I did my last like fat loss phase. I did like a quick mini cut, but Brandon.
Yeah, we actually did a podcast the night before Jeff made his engagement. Not nervous at all. I will tell you, out of all the people I know, first of all, Jeremiah is the most relaxed, soon to be married individual that I've ever met as a client, especially. I'm telling them, I'm like, listen, I want to make these buffers. I'm fat loss phase yesterday. And I'm like, listen, Jeremiah, I want to buffer in. This is the projection of the time length I think that you would need to get lean. However, I'm going to put this buffer in. I also want to know, what are your plans the weeks coming in? Do you have any stressors? I'm trying to take in everything into consideration because I've worked with so many married couples. He's like, dude, I'm completely relaxed. I'm not stressed at all. We're good. I was like, all right, say no more.
Have you been stressed for years, Jeff? I feel like mine is, I don't know. Katie is she's a planner, so she's so on top of all that stuff. And I'm just like, I honestly just, hey, yeah, do your thing. That's fine. So I think maybe I'm just not as involved as some people has. I don't know. For me, I don't feel like it's been a stressful thing at all.
Same thing for me. Allie pretty much takes care of her mom, take care of it all. And I'm just like, hey, if that's what you want, I'm cool with that. You know what I mean? So it's been like super chill like that. I think the only source of stress, it has been any stress she has sometimes can trickle over. You know how it goes, right? Like some of that stress can sometimes trickle over. So I would say that's probably the only stress that I've had with the wedding is that. But other than that, it's been, like you said, same thing. It's okay, that's cool with me.
That's really something like I can't communicate well enough. Like we don't need to be, from my end at least, we don't need to be worried about that. It's funny to me that you're worried about me being stressed about it because I hadn't even thought about that. Like I haven't felt stressed about it once. So it's just funny.
I think it's just a natural reaction, having worked with so many clients over the years that have gotten married and have been stressed as a result. And also that's also a reflection on the work that you've done on yourself. And we've spoken about this on your own podcast. Like early on in this year or even last year, I'd said, listen, you're going through a lot. Your business is growing astronomically. Like I'm going to give you advice based off of what has worked for me. I went and I sought a counselor. I went and I spoke to someone about the stresses, about the anxiety. I was running a massive supplement company. I felt like the pressure of the world was on top of me. Everything was on my shoulders. I needed someone to talk to. And yes, we have a great network. And I even had told you, listen, I'm always here for you if you need to talk. But I do think that having someone in your corner that's specialized in the mental aspect is a huge advantage. And you've done the deep work and you've benefited from it. So your ability to manage stress at this point as compared to when we first linked up like a year and a half ago is astronomically different. So that's kudos to you first and foremost. But I will say that I have a lot of clients out there that will be listening to this and know that we've had to make various adjustments and concessions to work around the stresses in their life as they've led into a wedding. And those are things that for some, that's a necessary part of the process. And if it is, it's all good. But it's a blessing that it isn't for you guys, honestly.
Yeah. And also, if you're hearing this, please don't, and you're more stressed about your wedding, please don't feel bad because I guarantee 99% of people listening to this are doing more planning for their wedding than I am. So definitely don't feel bad about that either. But anyways,
that's my thought too. I know there's people that probably do a lot more planning for it. So that is obviously going to have more stress. But I definitely feel like I feel like with I guess the field we're in and like working with clients and stuff like that. And Brandon, you hit on it. I do think that we've probably put some work into like stress management and like stuff like that. And that certainly helps. It's not like necessarily that, I guess it's maybe, I think it's all going to be dependent on the person, but I think we probably are just a little bit better at finding more, I don't want to say healthy, but just more productive ways of managing and lowering stress like than maybe some people do as well too. So I think there's that. I want to hit on just training real quick. So as far as like training goes, I'm at 4 days a week training, enjoying it, just trying to progress, taking form videos, stuff like that. And then the other thing, just focusing a little bit more on like my aerobic base and trying to build that up a little bit more. That's something that I've really neglected for the longest time. I play hockey once a week, but that's like, it is cardio obviously, but it's just super intense. And I don't have that good like aerobic base and I've never focused on that. So I've become a little bit more into that and just learning more about that and how that system works and just the importance of building a good aerobic base. And so I've been dipping into that a little bit more. We got a stationary bike. So I've been doing that a couple times a week. And I just want to do it because one, I want to learn about it more. I want to see if it's something I can implement with my clients. I don't know if you guys, how much you guys have done with this, but I do feel like it's a little bit from a mental standpoint, it's just a little bit different than like weight training. And then I do think it can benefit your weight training as well too, especially somebody like me that's only done either super high intense for hockey and then the weight training. And then on the lower end of this spectrum, just walking. So finding that nice little base there. So that was one other change. And I feel like from a fat loss standpoint, I have seen a little bit of an uptick in my energy expenditure just from day to day. Like right now, and maybe we'll talk about this when we talk about intuitive eating, but I haven't really tracked too much and I'm making sure I'm hitting my protein throughout the day and the weight's just been falling off. So I don't know if that's just a byproduct of the time I was in a building phase or if it's implementing this or just my skill built up. I'm not sure, but I have noticed that like it just seems like weight's just coming off ahead of schedule, and it hasn't been like super challenging either. So I don't know if
Great, man. I will say that I am really pleased first to hear from you about you doing aerobic training, but in general, like I was on the podcast a few months ago with Brian Borstein and Aaron Straker. And I remember when I even went on and spoke with them years ago about energy flux, and Brian was doing steps, but it wasn't like a high titration of steps. And I remember the first podcast I ever did with Jeremiah, it was about my health-centric coaching model. And I spoke about the importance of aerobic fitness because the aerobic system is what governs your ability to recover, replenish ATP. It helps in mitochondrial biogenesis. When you're saying how you feel better, the cognition benefits, that's from brain-derived nootropic factor that happens more preferentially when we do aerobic work. So there's so many health benefits, metabolic benefits, mitochondrial benefits, all of these benefits to doing aerobic work. And it's something that I've always, I've incorporated into my training since 2015, 2014. I was always doing aerobic work. It's something that I used to do, and I still do it with certain clients. I used to do a phase called the prep before the prep. And really what that was an aerobic building phase. I would do hard cardio out the gate, heavy, like I would get them into aerobic training phase, whether it be, at one time I did do a little bit too much HIIT, and that was a mistake of my own. We were really locked into where HIIT training was seen as the end all be all. That was 2014, 2015, that area or that era when Lane was talking all about it and all these guys within the contest prep realm. But I will say from about 2016 onwards, I've done with my contest prep clients that we're not getting ready to get into a prep, but I'm doing a prep before the prep, which is essentially a primer for a prep phase. I would really like to titrate up cardio and get those aerobic adaptations so that they're better able to run through substrates. They're more metabolically flexible, meaning they can go between substrates. They can utilize fatty acids when they're doing low intensity activities like your fasted cardio or like your low intensity aerobic training. And then they can switch to the substrate of utilizing carbohydrates during glycolytic activities like your resistance training. It's going to help with insulin sensitivity. It's going to help with nutrient partitioning, whether you do it pre or post. We know I'm a big fan of post-meal walks, but also you can increase insulin sensitivity and GLUT4 translocation, which is a non-insulin mediated form of glucose uptake, by just doing some type of aerobic training before. And especially if you're doing something that's like cardio based, especially with your legs are your biggest muscles. So you're gonna be able to uptake glucose, especially if you do it prior to taking in a meal. So doing some cardio, oftentimes with my competitors, I'll have them do fasted cardio, and it will be low intensity to moderate intensity, but it'll get their heart rate up, it'll get them sweating, it'll get them oxidizing some fat because they're in this low insulin state. And then also they've primed their body to uptake insulin or uptake carbohydrates through non-insulin mediated means better. And also we see that insulin sensitivity from a diurnal perspective. If we look at chrononutrition, you have higher insulin sensitivity in the morning. So then I can partition more of their calories or a larger bolus of carbohydrates because they just oxidized a bunch of fatty acids and have just increased insulin sensitivity. So I've really loved where I've heard a lot of more people now. I will say people have gotten way down the rabbit hole in comparison to where I'm at. Like for instance, Brian has really taken an interest into cycling and stuff. I have the most respect for that. He had me on the podcast to talk about the different mechanisms, looking at AMPK versus mTOR. And that's where my real focus was, because I was looking mechanistically. Is this going to inhibit my gains? I'm looking at concurrent training literature, but I'm not going to, he's more on almost like the endurance spectrum now, where I've heard that he's doing a race soon. And I believe he had said that he's prioritizing that as his like 1A, meaning his priority is cardio over resistance training. For me, first of all, physique has always been my focus. I work with mostly physique athletes or physique focused individuals. So our 1A always going to be resistance training and optimizing body composition. But I think aerobic training has so many benefits, not only from a physical, a mental, a cognitive, a metabolic perspective, that I really think that I'm really happy to see other people within this space get onto it and realize that there can be a multimodal approach to optimizing body composition. So we're talking resistance training. We're talking steps in general physical activity. We're talking cardiovascular training. Like, let's pull out as many tools as we have available to us and utilize them, the right tool for the right job. So if you're really trying to optimize not only your body composition, your fat loss, but also your aerobic fitness, your health, your function, let's utilize all three of those tools. If you are someone that you just, you have very limited time and you don't really have an interest in really pushing yourself, let's at least get a minimum effective dose of resistance training, really build skeletal muscle tissue, and then let's do some steps, because that's going to be a low barrier of entry way to get some physical activity. But if you are someone like ourselves, where we want that extra percentage, I told Jeremiah for this building phase, I was like, listen, we're keeping cardio in. Usually I would drop it out, but we're going to keep cardiovascular training in, because as you continue to get bigger, we continue to push your training. There's only going to be advantages to be able to, because a lot of people, they think, all right, resistance training is an anaerobic activity. It's at the other end of the spectrum. Let's stimulate mTOR. Let's stay away from stimulating AMPK. First of all, when you stimulate AMPK through or MK through aerobic training, now you're getting better at oxidizing nutrients. You're getting better at switching between fuel substrates. You're getting better at turning on mitochondrial biogenesis, which is only going to help you more in your anaerobic or your resistance training outcomes. And in between sets, yes, resistance training is an anaerobic activity, meaning that we burn through glucose while we're in a set. But in between those sets, if you're that person that has shit aerobic fitness, you're that person that is gassed for minutes between sets of squats. I've seen many bodybuilders over the years where they are jacked beyond measure. They have incredible physiques, but they can't go up a flight of stairs without getting out of breath. They have sleep apnea. They have all these issues regarding oxygen carrying capacity and as well as aerobic fitness. But then they do a hard set of squats and they're down and out for 5 to 10 minutes. Listen, if the biggest limiter as to how much volume you can get in a session is that your time limitation and your rest intervals, they don't align, because you get one set every 10 minutes and you have 60 minutes to train. You can do 6 working sets per session. That is an issue that we need to work on, and we need to do it through other modalities besides just resistance training. So I really think you're taking both approaches, because I think it is a more well-balanced and a more optimal approach in totality, as well as for a longevity perspective. Like, we're all getting older. You know what I mean? We really, and I promote this to my clients. Like, listen, resistance training is great. If that's your priority, I just want you to sprinkle in some aerobic training. But at the other side, I deal with a lot of women that come from a endurance background. So I get a lot of clients that have suffered from hypothalamic amenorrhea, relative energy deficiency, the chronic consequences of low energy availability from doing such endurance work, HIIT training, cardio classes, boot camp classes, all that kind of stuff. And then I'm getting them let's maintain that aerobic base, not overdo it, but let's incorporate some more resistance training to build that bone mineral density, to build muscle tissue, to increase your metabolic capacity in terms of being able to eat more and being able to maintain your body weight on more calories. Because I look at resistance training and aerobic training as 2 different spectrums. So resistance training is an investment going forward. So a metabolic investment, meaning we build tissue and then we have a higher resting metabolic rate, but also we have higher resting energy expenditure. So yes, muscle burns about 3 times more calories per pound than fat does, but also metabolically active muscle, if you have more muscle tissue on your frame, every time you move, every time you do something, you're burning more calories. Whereas aerobic training is great from a calorie burning standpoint in that moment. So you see that you have better ability to burn calories in, say, a 60-minute session of cardio as compared to a 60-minute session of resistance training. But it's almost like a one-time investment. So you get that benefit, but you don't have much of an EPOC or an exercise post-oxygen consumption effect, meaning your energy expenditures increase after. But we can combine both to really make dieting more efficient in terms of getting higher energy expenditure through cardio and being able to eat a little bit more because you're burning.
Yeah. And like I said, the weight training still is my priority, right? Like, I like that you hit on that, because I do think it's important to, hey, what is your, like you said, your 1A, or what's your 1, what's your 2, like that's important. I'm curious to do it from like the recovery aspect of it. Like, my understanding is like building that good aerobic base can be super helpful from a recovery standpoint. I want to see what that looks like. And again, I've neglected this part of training for a very long period of time because I was worried that it was going to get in the way with gains. But as I learned more, it's, hey, it might potentially increase them from the recovery standpoint, the other things that you mentioned, Brandon. But again, what is that fine line there with it to where it's going to negatively impact? And I feel like it's probably a little bit more than what I had thought. So long as things like nutrition, sleep, recovery, stuff like that's on point, I feel like I could probably get away with a little bit more compared to somebody that has poor lifestyle and they are just it's too high intensity all the time. It's okay. Yeah. Now that is going to start to impact your gains, and you need to look into that. Yeah. It's super cool. And I find it interesting. So yeah, Jeremiah.
That stuff is the zone two stuff, to play devil's advocate. I think there's a lot of value to it, but at the same time, like, something that I have seen come from these conversations is people taking it out of context. It reminds me a lot of this in the most optimal. There's also, and there's nothing wrong with this at all, but there are also like a lot of like influencers out there who basically like their content is just, hey, here's a more optimal variation of like your medial delt lateral raise, which is great. And I think we all love that stuff. But a lot of times, like, what I have seen, and this is something I've had to address a lot with clients lately with both the zone 2 things, is like, hey, am I not doing enough zone 2 cardio? This person says zone 2 cardio can increase their gains. Is that the reason I'm not making gains like these other clients? And it's been like, no, you know how every week I'm giving you the feedback, we're still not training hard enough. It doesn't matter how much zone 2 cardio we put in, right? Or are you gatekeeping that like secret sauce lat pull down variation? If we change this variation just slightly, you're suddenly are you just not giving me that? Because I saw this influencer put out, this is the most optimal. And is that the reason I'm not making the gains? And again, it doesn't matter if we change the angle of your lat pull down by 5 degrees or if you're like wrapping your arm around your rib cage slightly more, where I think it is easy for a lot of people to listen to this and, okay, that's the reason I'm not progressing. And it's so often, hey, we're just still not training hard enough again. And I think that a lot of times too, what I've had to caution some clients of lately is like, we're using this as a distraction to avoid actually dealing with the reason we're not making progress at the rate we could, which is, again, the intensity. So I would just, again, I think with these conversations, just making sure that's also out there to where this stuff is great. I'm all for it. I'm definitely all for it. I don't say I love cardio, but as Brandon knows, I do it every single day. I don't miss on my cardio. But within that, I think like also that's making sure that we're looking at it as kind of order of priorities. And I would say from like body composition change perspective, making sure that intensity is there first for most people is going to be a much bigger needle mover.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. It's definitely lower on the priority list. Brandon, go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. I want to make it clear, like when I speak about cardio, or I used to speak about aerobic training, I always said, really my stance, and this is what the literature has borne out for years, but people really ignored this. I think we always go from one end of the spectrum to the other. And honestly, I've always been in the middle with moderation. I understand that isn't sexy, but I'm going to go with what my experience shows me and what the evidence, the compelling evidence and the body of evidence leads us to believe and to know and to understand. And here's the thing. We went from thinking cardio killed your gains to now people are like, oh, cardio enhances your gains. Now, there's some caveats to that. So let's actually look at the research study that showed that cardio can enhance your gains. It's by Thomas et al. It's at a Stu Phillips lab, and it was released 2022. And so what they did was they essentially put people onto untrained individuals. So let's make this very clear. And I covered this entire study in detail with Brian and Aaron on E-Train Prosper podcast. And so if you guys want to hear more details about it, but I'll give you a little synopsis of it. Essentially what they did was they took untrained individuals and either put them on a pre-study period where they did 6 weeks of cycling with one leg. So it was unilateral design. And so it was essentially within subjects designed so that they could really separate any confounding variables. So you have the same person, the same genetics, the same nutrition, the same sleep, stress, lifestyle, all those type of things. So it is confounded, or there are no confounders essentially. So what he did was 6 weeks, one leg was trained with a unicycle. Essentially, they were just doing cycling on one leg, and then the other leg was untrained. And when they went into a leg training program, they saw that there was better gains in the leg that had been trained through cycling. So we could say, yes, that's an improvement in aerobic fitness, but these are new individuals to training. So they were going to get newbie gains regardless. What they really showed from a mechanistic or a molecular perspective, which really, I'm big into mechanisms. You guys both know that I can get into the weeds with you guys on this. However, we have to realize that mechanisms don't always yield real world outcomes. So I always say this with hesitance. I will go over the data. However, realize that this might not be applicable to your advanced training like a Jeremiah or like a Jeff or any of our clients that already have a fitness base. So within that, they saw mitochondrial changes, better mitochondrial biogenesis, and they also saw some, I believe it was satellite cell proliferation. So they had more satellite cells essentially in the fiber or the fiber tissues of the leg that was trained. But all of that showing us is that you should be at a better fitness level if you want to enhance your gains. If you have piss poor fitness, you probably should add some cardio, and it may enhance your gains more so from the perspective that you can train harder. It always comes back to the fundamental principles. And that's why I really find it ironic. Our last time that we had a coaches roundtable, one of the questions was asking us about the new meta regression on proximity to failure and hypertrophy. And it was like, all of a sudden, I went through a whole research review on the study. This is only telling us what we all already knew. The closer you get to failure, the more gains you make. However, we have some caveats with that. There are some confounding variables. There were various moderators. So we see that it was only applicable. Training to failure was only optimal, quote unquote, or the best when it was low to moderate volumes, low frequency of 2 to 3 days per week. So it may not apply to you. If you're someone that trains with a low frequency, with a low to moderate volume, yes, take it to the fucking house because you're really not training that often. You don't have to really worry about we're looking at the stimulus to recovery ratio essentially. And you're not really worrying about the fatigue aspect of the stimulus to fatigue ratio because you're not training that often. So your recovery capacity is in line. But if you're training 5 to 6 days a week and you're utilizing high volumes, taking every single set to the house may just accumulate fatigue more where it inhibits, especially high threshold motor unit recruitment, because we see that fatigue actually downregulates our ability to actually turn on the highest threshold motor units, which are needed to grow the most muscle, because high threshold motor units are the biggest muscle fibers, which have the most potential for growth. So for every gimme, there's a gotcha. And we always have to look at both spectrums. It's not, hey, cardio used to kill gains, and now cardio enhances gains. More so in the middle, get your fitness on point, and you will prosper, but realize that everything is specific. There is a principle of specificity. If you want to get big, you got to train like people do to enhance muscle growth and maximize hypertrophy. And that is training with sufficient training volume, sufficient intensity, and making sure that you're executing things correctly. So that should always be the fundamental principles. There are no hacks. There are no get out of jail free cards. There's no shortcuts to the land of hypertrophy where you magically make gains. It's not going to be adding in another low intensity cardio session. However, if your limiting factor, we have to look at bottlenecks or anchors in your program. If you can't even breathe after a set of squats or bicep curls, let's work on some of that aerobic fitness. But let's make sure you're sufficiently pushing yourself in the gym to maximize the adaptations within that subsect of what we're looking to get, which is muscular adaptations, muscular hypertrophy adaptations.
I don't know. Basically what I want to say is I definitely was not, and I don't think you took it this way, Jared, but I definitely am not doing it for the body composition, right? That's I don't know if I made it sound like that, but definitely not.
100% took it that way, dude.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just fucking. No, I didn't.
I thought you're like,
I know what you're saying.
But no, because I do think that if that is your route to go about improving your body composition, you're probably going to be unhappy with it. But yeah, no, it's certainly not for the body composition purposes. It's more so, again, that just personal. I just want to build that aerobic base up and see how I can split it up as well too. I've always been intrigued by training for multiple different things, and I just think it's super cool. But like I said, building muscle is still number one. And like you said, you need to make sure the priority's there. And like you said, Jeremiah, it's that now it can just be used as this, oh, that's the reason why I'm not making gains. We need to do that. Like you said, oh, you're holding it out. You're holding this out for me. You're holding that one secret, but that's not it. Like you said, it's the training intensity that's super, important. Like you might not be doing that. So cool. You guys want to jump into the questions?
Yeah, let's hit it.
Cool. So I was like, I don't know which one I'm going to go with here first, but we'll do the intuitive eating one first and we'll finish with the weight gain. So what are your thoughts on intuitive eating? Do you think intuitive eating can be an effective approach to use during a fat loss phase? Brandon, you brought this one to the table. Curious to hear your thoughts on it. And Jeremiah, we'll have you go next.
Yeah, so this was a question. This is a multitude of questions that I had received from certain listeners because there seems to be a lot of individuals in the space that are speaking about intuitive eating for fat loss phases, or can it be used as an effective approach to fat loss phases? And really, based on the conversations I've had and the content I've been seeing around it, I think really when it comes down to it, there are a lot of misconceptions and confusion around what intuitive eating is and what its focus is, especially within the physique and body composition space that we're in. So if you actually look at what or who intuitive eating construct is actually used with, it's usually meant for those with eating disorders or those with a poor relationship with food. So despite people had asked me, do you utilize this for their clients? And I found it really interesting. And I said, listen, I'm going to cover this on a podcast to really go into it in more detail because there's a lot of details that I think are being really missed. And often with our industry, people say things and they utilize terms without really having a full understanding of it. So it causes misinformation and disinformation. And so despite the fact that I know what intuitive eating is, I don't use it in practice as I've looked into the literature on the topic and it doesn't apply to the clientele that I work with. I work with individuals that are very body composition improvement oriented. And when we actually look at intuitive eating TM, which is the trademark version, this is a weight neutral approach that was originally created by 2 registered dietitians with the intention of improving someone's relationship with food. So this was not an approach that was created to apply to fat and weight loss or muscle gain or body recomposition. So if you're looking to intentionally drop body fat and lose weight through a dietary approach, you're technically not doing intuitive eating as it was designed. And we also have to realize, and this is another thing, like when we hear about flexible dieting, people don't realize that is a mental construct. That is not a diet. Flexible dieting is not a diet. And a lot of people want to label it as such. If you're actually looking to the literature, especially from Westenhofer, it is not a diet. It is a mental construct and how we approach food. And it's more of so looking at things through a flexible mindset rather than a diet itself. And so intuitive eating in and of itself is not a diet. It's a set of principles that were designed to be used in clinical practice, which many misinterpret. And it promotes concepts such as having unconditional permission to eat, relying on your hunger and your fullness to determine your calorie intake, and using internal cues to drive your food decisions. And these principles were designed to help someone improve their relationship with food, not to achieve body composition goals. So if you actually look into the actual intuitive eating principles and stuff, none of these principles promote the type of principles that we would use to maximize fat loss and body composition progress, like things that we do in day-to-day practice, such as tracking our intake, inducing a deficit, maintaining a high protein intake, and then making dietary modifications to drive our physique progress, not based off our intuition or our internal drivers, off our hunger, based off our physique progress. So I think really when it comes down to it, it'd be disingenuous to portray what we do as fitness professionals. Because these are people are sending me other fitness professionals reels and their posts about them saying that they intuitively eat and they're getting shredded or they're getting lean. And it's, dude, I think it's really disingenuous as a fitness professional when you know more than your lay public to portray what we do as intuitive eating as though we're just relying on intuitive signals, but more so what we are relying on is the positive habits and behaviors we've built up over time. So for anyone out there that has seen this type of content, when you hear fitness professionals say that they're dieting to get lean using intuitive eating, it's an indication that they're not truly familiar with the literature on intuitive eating and they don't even know what it really is about. And what they're really doing is they're leaning on the skills and the habits around nutrition and dieting that they've used after years of meticulously tracking every calorie and macro. And now they're able to execute these habits almost on autopilot without tracking every single meal they consume. But it's mostly because they maintain these same consistent eating habits. So even if I were not to track a meal out, and I wasn't to track every single meal that I have in my fitness now, bet your ass I know what I'm eating because I'm going to be able to calculate. My mind works like a calculator at this point, to be honest with you guys. I don't wish, my mind on anyone else, not my clients, because I know exactly how many calories and macros are in an orange or an apple or in many things because I've looked these up so many times. So even if I decided, hey, listen, for the day, I'm not using this. I'm not using MyFitnessPal. Bet your ass I'm going to know how to calculate exactly what I'm eating from a macronutrient perspective and an approximate calorie perspective. And what we really have to realize is getting lean skews our hunger and satiety signals. So by default, if we were to follow an intuitive eating principle, we'd be eating more and we'd stop fat loss. You'd get a few weeks into the process and you'd automatically go back to energy balance or even into a surplus, which is why encouraging someone with poor habits around nutrition and who doesn't have a solid foundation of nutritional literacy like we do to intuitively eat to get lean or gain muscle is like throwing someone who doesn't know how to swim into the deep end of the swimming pool. That's really how I look at it. Because if you haven't spent time diligently tracking and learning what's in food, and you also don't have a few successful fat loss phases and muscle gain phases under your belt, you're not going to be able to intuitively fumble your way through the process of fat loss and come out the other side having successfully reached your goal. So really when it comes down to it, can you utilize intuitive eating for a fat loss phase? No. By concept, by the intention behind the principle, you can't. And when you hear people say that, and here's the thing, what's interesting about this was I had a conversation with Eric Helms. We just released it on Sunday. And he said that he has had to correct himself from saying intuitive eating because that's not what he meant from the guidelines of intuitive eating TM. We went into a whole conversation about this. And he really said, listen, I made this statement for him. I was like, guys, when you hear Eric saying he's not tracking his intake, that doesn't mean he's eating intuitively. And Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but here's the thing. Let's think about Eric's nutritional knowledge. His master's is in nutrition. His master's research is on a high protein diets. And then he's got a PhD in auto-regulation. So if anyone is going to be able to auto-regulate their nutritional intake, it's going to be someone that is 20 plus years into this career and into this experience, has multiple contest preps under his belt, and is a nutrition professional that has helped hundreds of people and has educated tens of thousands of individuals. So don't think that because you see someone out there, and Eric's not like one of these influencers promoting intuitive eating or anything of that sort. He's actually one of the best representatives of someone that has been able to utilize and maintain habits to progress him forward. Same thing with Alberto Nunez and the rest of that team. However, when you see other influencers that really have no nutritional knowledge and they're telling you, yeah, you can intuitively, you can eat whatever you want and still get lean. That is a sales marketing aspect. None of these guys, it's very funny. Most people talk about food in one of two ways within this industry. And it just shows that they have very little nuanced takes on it. And they also really haven't worked with people in the real world because they either talk about food in numbers, like they're like, oh, they make these generic statements. All you have to do is hit this macro, X amount of grams of protein, X amount of grams of carbs, and X amount of grams of fats, or these percentage splits. They give you like the zone diet split, whatever it may be. Or they talk about nutrition. Oh, you can eat whatever you want. It's all good. You can be flexible and you can get to your goals. Like none of that is a nuanced enough take because we have to consider the specific individual client that we're working with. And for some, macros and calories are going to work great. For others, utilizing like that I utilize with certain of my clients where they're utilizing, making sure we're checking off sufficient high protein intake at each meal, say 3 to 4 meals per day, a certain target of servings of vegetables and fruits per day, making sure that we're getting balanced meals. We're making sure the predominance of our plate is of greens and micronutrient dense food sources. We're making sure we're tracking some of our intake on Chronometer to make sure we don't have micronutrient deficiencies. We're hitting all these solid and these big rocks, but by no means would I ever suggest for a client, yeah, just eat whatever you want. Like, it's just that casual, but it sounds good on a reel. Or when people tell you, hey, you can eat whatever you want and get shredded, they're not telling you that 6 out of 7 days of the week, they're going to starve you. So you can earn that cheat meal. It's just like it's frustrating from a nutritional perspective, because I really feel like all three of us have really spent so much time within this industry and also try to put out so much educational content that's true. And sometimes we have to say, listen, whenever anyone asks me, I speak on a lot of podcasts about getting lean. It's never easy. Yes, do I have hunger management strategies that I can utilize, and I manipulate your palatability to make you less hungry and your energy density to ensure that you're getting more volume and more satiety per calorie? Absolutely. I will pull out every trick in the book that I can, but I will tell you, regardless, is you get leaner and leaner, especially if you're someone that wants to get stage ready, you're going to have to deal with hunger. That is a natural, inherent response to losing body fat. That's a good sign. And I understand people don't like hearing that, but that is a physiological response from the body saying, hey, we're liberating and we're losing stored energy, and we want some more. Really, when it comes down to it, I don't believe that we can utilize intuitive eating for a fat loss phase. I think it would put you at a large disadvantageous position. First and foremost, it wouldn't be successful. And then also, those that are promoting this as an approach, I think it's disrespectful to the dietitians and all the clinicians that have utilized this in practice to help people that actually have clinical diagnosed eating disorders. And that's what this approach was intended for. It wasn't a diet to get shredded.
Yeah, I think that, as you said, I think where a lot of this comes from, and I'm not as clear on exactly what the like intuitive eating TM definition is, but again, as I see it promoted a lot, I think that if you are following a lot of individuals like on Instagram, be very cautious of someone who is promoting what they're like, using their physique as the main selling point and then promoting like what they're doing currently as like what you need to do to get there, right? It's easy to look at, as you said. I know there's so many people out there where it's like, hey, I just I just eat intuitively now, even if that's not the correct definition. I don't track. Look how great I look. And it's, well, hey, how did that person get there? And for so many people, it's, well, yeah, she spent 5 years tracking extremely consistently and really nailing all these things. Or similarly with training, where it's like, hey, I only train 2 days a week now and I maintain this great physique. So you should be, and so many people take that and I should be able to. And it's, we didn't spend the time first to build all this muscle up. And I think there's like such a big disconnect there that, yeah, that drives me crazy to see as well. But I fully agree. It's, again, like if that was just intuitive spending for me, would go terribly. I think like relating it back to our finances, I just spent money on what I wanted to, and I'm going to honor this craving for, I want to buy a new fucking car. Like, it's not going to work out. And I think for most people, it's again like that. The idea always, like the best marketing in fitness, I think, is the idea that like you just pay someone, they're going to make it easy for you. It's going to be specifically with nutrition. It's, again, you don't have to give up any of your favorite foods. And again, I think we're all for, yes, there's room for, we're not saying there's this list of bad foods that are, but again, I think the idea where it easily turns into, hey, yeah, just keep living the same life as you were before. Now you pay me, I think is like how like it's interpreted. And for some reason, you're going to get a different result because of that. I think that's how a lot of these things turn. I'm getting off on a tangent, but yes, I fully agree. I don't have anything else to add there, really. Jeff, you got anything?
I was just going to hit on, you guys made great points on all that. I was just going to hit on, like Brandon, you said there, with if you haven't gone through the fat loss phases, the building phases, the tracking, it's if you just go off of how you feel, you're going to end up being back at like maintenance or surplus when you are dieting. And then also like before that too, people that I feel like this is pitched to, it's also like their hunger and satiety cues are all just like out of whack as well too.
Dysregulated.
So it's like that right then and there is not, it's just not going to work because of that. I know that I'm sure that when you have new clients, like that's the biggest thing is they just, from all the, maybe how they've eaten, maybe not as much as clients you guys work with, and you guys work with more advanced individuals, but I feel like a lot of people that are trying to get into it and they want to use this approach, they're like, yeah, they've just been, the food choices, there's just so many things, sleeps off. It's like it and so
it's never marketed towards people who have been already tracking for years and already have a great knowledge of it.
Yeah, but I think that's the biggest issue, though, because if we really think about it, a lot of people that end up going in and getting or gravitating or getting drawn to those that put out this content or those that don't have experience with tracking. They don't have experience. Right. They don't have nutritional knowledge. They don't have a lot of nutritional literacy, and they shouldn't have to. If you're coming to a quote unquote nutrition professional, we should teach you about nutrition. We shouldn't just teach you about and this is my biggest issue with what this industry has turned into is most people have become macro coaches. They just throw you 3 numbers and send you on your way. They don't teach you about food. They don't teach you about the nutritional quality of food. They're not talking about micronutrient statuses. They're not looking at your hormone profiles. They're not looking at your blood work. They're not looking at all the downstream effects of your nutrition. And really, when we come down to it, we do not eat numbers We can't do food by numbers. Yes, we can do it in a calorie calculator. You can do it in MyFitnessPal, but you don't eat numbers. You don't eat macros. You eat food, and you need nutrients. And so within that, I really think a lot of times, and this is where a lot of people go wrong within their early, or even if it's not early, but they haven't tracked, and they see this intuitive eating marketing, and they see that, hey, they're making it easy. You can eat whatever you want. You don't have to track your intake because that's not part of intuitive eating. All well and good. I understand that from a food relationship perspective, but here's the issue. If you've never tracked, you've never taken a portion of time to really dedicate yourself to the process of learning what is in food. What do portion sizes look like? What are adequate sources, high quality sources, and satiating sources of different food groups? I'm sure you guys have had individuals where they think peanut butter is a protein source, or they think that potatoes are evil, but they don't realize they're against carbs, or they don't realize potatoes are the most satiating food source that we have in the satiety index by Holt and colleagues. And so really when it comes down to it, tracking data helps us make better decisions, because think about it logically. If we only leaned on our hunger and satiety signals, most of us would consume more calories than we need to lose weight and to lose fat, and we'd end up gaining weight. And so we'd also more likely consume more carbs and more fats and less protein than is optimal and ideal to optimize body composition. And Jeff, I know this is something that you have personally told me, that if you did not track your protein, which you say that you're not tracking now, but you're always looking after your protein intake. And that's why I said, I have certain clients that don't track everything down to the gram, but we have one of two things. We either have a protein target per day, where they'll just track protein grams, or they have an amount of protein per meal, where I'm making sure they're getting a sufficient intake of protein to hit that leucine threshold to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and to ensure that we're having an adequate intake of protein, because that is, from a hierarchical perspective, from a macronutrient perspective, that is going to be the most, essentially, that we need to really optimize body composition. But here's the thing. If we went by intuition, most of us would not eat sufficient amount of protein. You wouldn't, Jeremiah, you probably wouldn't either. And so, like, even us as nutrition professionals would struggle with it. So think about someone that doesn't have the nutritional knowledge, the nutritional awareness. They don't even know the difference between a protein, a fat, and a carb source. They're looking at fatty meats as their number one source of protein intake, or peanut butter, or whatever it may be. And so they don't have the nutrition around, or they don't have the knowledge around nutrition that we do. So then these same influencers that are as experienced as we are in the industry say, listen, you don't have to worry about tracking. You don't have to go through any of this work. I'll make it easy for you. Just eat whatever you want. I'm going to put you on a program and you're going to lose weight. All that's setting people up for is failure. And it's going to put them in that failure loop where they feel that something's wrong with them. They feel that they're dysfunctional. No, it's just because you've taken a suboptimal approach. And the issue is, the reason you fail time and time again is because you continue to either go with fad diet approaches that may work for X person or someone down the street, your neighbor, your family member, but they aren't designed for you. They're cookie cutter, they're generic in nature, and they don't make any personal adjustments. And then if we really look at it from like a conceptual standpoint, we have to realize that the vast majority of our society, especially in America, upwards of 70 to 75% of Americans today are overweight and or obese due to over-consuming calories and moving too little, or essentially being too sedentary for their intake. So how do we most effectively overcome this with clients that come to us who are in these categories, that are they have excess adiposity, or they have a poor relationship with food, or they're unable to moderate their intake because they eat so many hyperpalatable foods? So if we really look into literature on the drive and calorie increase that comes just from the fact of eating hyperpalatable foods, we see that in Kevin Hall's metabolic ward study, where they matched macronutrients and energy density and all these different things. This was like the most optimal, say, quote unquote, processed food diet versus non-processed food diet that you could ever find. However, in the processed condition, they ate more than 500 calories per day and gained 2 pounds of fat over the course of 2 weeks, as compared to when they just swapped out those same food sources with whole food sources, because of the satiety-inducing effects of whole foods. So say that we just let someone go by intuition and they have no knowledge around food, and they go for what we would normally go for, which is tasty, hyperpalatable foods that spike our dopamine. So we're getting these great sensations. We're energy-seeking creatures, essentially. And so now they're over-consuming calories, or never seeing their goals. And so what we really need to do, and this is why I don't believe that we should be taking an intuitive eating approach, and I think it's misleading to make people believe that we can even do that, is we need to focus on habit change and behavior modification around nutrition, training, and movement. But I also believe that in order to help them make these changes, we need to track at least a few variables. So that could be literally someone coming off the bat and they just tracking their portions, or they can track their nutrition and they can track their step count. So now we have some proxy within the coaching process where we know approximately their energy intake and approximately their energy intake, their nutritional habits, and approximately their energy expenditure or their physical activity levels. Because we see statistically, and this is something that all three of us have spoken about numerous times, that 95% of diets fail in the long term, meaning people lose weight but regain all that they've lost and then some. But here's the thing. We're working with, and I know for myself, and I'll speak for you guys as well, because I know I've met some of your clients, and obviously we have consulted many times over the years. We work with the 5% of individuals who use diet and training to get leaner, to get more muscular, and to optimize their body composition. So these are people that are willing to, go through the process of tracking their intake, at least for a period of time where they learn things that are going to help them up for success. And really, when it comes down to it, I don't want to paint this as intuitive eating is bad, because I think for the clinical use that it has, it could be, I've seen research studies where it really improves people's relationship with food, helps with binge eating behaviors, but those are people that A, I'm not working with, and B, if those people came to me and they currently were diagnosed with binge eating, I would refer them out first and foremost, or they were currently diagnosed with an eating disorder, I would refer them out. Or if someone came to me and they said, listen, I had a history of eating disorders and I want to work on my body composition, and they were still suffering from body image or body dysmorphia or issues with food, that is not a client that I would work on a body composition goal. I would work on maybe a primer phase. I would work on the relationship with food. And I would work with a qualified professional within the medical landscape, because that's not my scope of practice. That is not my specialty. It is the body composition's perspective. It is the health perspective. It is, I'd be able to run their lab work and making sure that we're shoring up gaps in their nutrition, but I couldn't put constructs on them in terms of what we need to do to drive fat loss. And I do think that one aspect that's promoted by intuitive eating is good, that we should use and we should take on, and this is more so because it aligns with the flexible dieting construct or the flexible dieting mentality, is that no food is good or bad, as that's a healthy approach to food from a mental perspective. But if your goal is to truly change your body composition, especially through fat loss, it does require, and we have to acknowledge this, it requires some form of restraint, because calorie restriction, after all, is needed to induce fat loss. So a deficit is a restraint on our calorie budget. But what we want to do is strive for flexible restraint rather than that rigid restraint. So really, we can use one of the principles of intuitive eating from a perspective of looking at food not as on or off diet, or not as good or bad. We could look at food as more conducive towards my goals, less conducive, more satiating, less satiating, more processed, less processed. But it's a spectrum. It's not this black or white dichotomous relationship. And we also have to realize that for every gimme, there's a gotcha. You want a better physique, you're going to have to put some sacrifices in the process. And we all know that. We've all gotten really lean, and we've spoken about the sacrifices required to do. So anyone out there that's listening that hears someone trying to sell them or pitch them this easy process, like it's this one quick fix, or it's going to be easy to get there, realize that good things come from hard situations. And generally, when things come easy, they generally either don't last. So yes, quick weight loss, where someone puts you in a weight loss clinic, you lose 30 pounds in 30 days, and it was all muscle, and then you regain even more than that. We see that statistically, that 1/3 to 2/3 of individuals that lose weight, especially in a crash dieting scenario, regain more weight than they lost in the first place. Now you're at a worse body composition. You have body decomposition. So you have lost more lean muscle tissue and gained more fat mass and suffered from body fat overshooting, which is something I've done podcasts with both you guys on. And so really, when it comes down to it, realize that any process is an investment of your time, of your resources, of your commitment, of your discipline. And then also you have to learn something in the process, because that is what coaching is about. It's about teaching you certain skills, and tracking is going to be one of those skills that, even just from a nutritional perspective and a nutritional awareness standpoint, you're going to be able to know what's in food. So when you go to a restaurant, what food swaps to make, or an approximation, it's not about being perfect. It's about aiming for progression, but you're going to be able to know essentially what is in food, what is a good source of carbohydrates, or what is a high yield of protein content. All right, I'm at a restaurant and now I have a choice between fish or tuna or chicken or sirloin steak, whatever it may be. And I'm going to go with something that's more conducive and it aligns with my goals because I've tracked. But if not, you might have just went with a pasta dish that has absolutely no protein on it because you weren't aware of what were good sources of protein or not. So really, when it comes down to it, I'm really big with empowering people with education. That's why I've been on hundreds of podcasts. I know that's why you guys do a lot of what you do. And really, I think that we need to put out enough information, enough good information, that it crowds out and it speaks over those that are putting out misinformation, disinformation, and misleading people to believe that certain approaches would be optimal for their goals when they're actually exactly the opposite.
Yeah, no, you summed that up pretty well. I was going to hit on this throughout that of, I said I wasn't tracking. And again, this is with the context of you guys are saying this entire time. That's years of me tracking my food intake, knowing 100%. That, getting my master's, like learning stuff. And then also on top of it, when I say I'm not tracking, I'm still tracking probably once or twice a week. My meal timing is like the same from day to day. Like I have a rotation of 4, 5, 6 meals.
Yeah, let's pull back the layers of the onion on that, because you could say you're not tracking. However, let's look at it like this, because I had this conversation with Eric Helms. So I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to let you, openly answer. Are you tracking anything? So we're going to go through all this. Are you tracking any single metric? So are you actually looking at your portion sizes when you're eating? Are you tracking your protein? Are you tracking your steps? Are you making sure you're checking off certain daily habits to drive you towards fat loss? Because all those things are what are called self-monitoring techniques. So I'm going to let you answer in a minute, but I will say that it doesn't have to be direct tracking. It could be tracking just protein and calories. It could be just tracking protein. It could be portions. It could be using a meal plan. Any of these things. It could be daily scale weighing. It could be looking at yourself visually. It could also be looking or checking off the boxes in terms of tracking your training, or making sure you're hitting a sufficient amount of sessions to maintain muscle tissue over the course of a week, and then also tracking your steps or going on. If you know that every single morning you start your day off with a walk and then you end your day off with a walk, all those are called in the literature self-monitoring tools. And these are all shown statistically and in all the literature to be what successful dieters do, not only during the fat loss phase itself, but also in the process of maintaining fat loss.
Yeah, doing like most of those, right? Steps. Like I said, the meal timing, it's 4 meals a day. Hey, it's timed around my workouts. So it's not specifically tracking calories and macros. It's like you said, different tracking, more self-monitoring. So I'm glad we had this conversation, because I do think, like you said, somebody could take that and be like, oh, so Jeff intuitively eats or doesn't track. And it's no, I still do track a good amount. It's just I'm not doing the meticulous carbs, fats, macros down to a T. And again, I'm still doing that every once in a while, a couple times a week, but not every single day. And again, with the context of, I've done years and years of tracking that down to the T to where I feel like I can.
And here's the thing, Jeff, you've earned that through the discipline that you've taken from years of doing this. Just like I said, I don't do that because I am an analytical individual. I like to track myself. And also I set every single Sunday, I'll tell you how I do this. Every single Sunday, I set myself a new meal plan. Why? Because do I need to follow a meal plan? No, but here's the thing. It lowers my decision fatigue. It lets me offload any of the mental or cognitive burden of trying to plan out my meals and playing macro Tetris. So many people do. I plan a meal plan every Sunday. I do it from Monday through Sunday. The next week, I literally lay out all my meals and align them towards my goals in terms of what my calorie and my macronutrient targets are. I type them into Chronometer. I make sure they hit my micronutrient needs. Then I prep from essentially Monday through Wednesday, and I do that on Sunday night, and I do another batch on Wednesday to last me through the rest of the week. And really, that's twice a week I have to literally cook food, and once a week I have to think about food. And believe me, I'm extremely productive because of that. Is that going to work for everyone? No. But essentially, I only have to track once a week because I eat the same meals day in and day out. I'm extremely consistent. The same thing could be said about your habits. But here's the thing. I've been training for 17 years. I've been coaching people for over 10 years. Jeff, all three of us have vast experience. And here's the thing, guys. You shouldn't have to have our experience to utilize some of these techniques. However, you do have to put in the work to earn the abilities, the skills, the habits, the behaviors, the ability to execute on autopilot, because those are the things that are going to set you up for success. So taking 6 months, 12 months to really meticulously monitor and track portion sizes or weigh your foods, or utilize a meal plan, but also track your macros on the side, utilizing ability to make food swaps and learning what is an ample food swap for a cup of rice. Is it 7 ounces of sweet potato? Things like that. And going back and forth and really learning food in terms of not only its numbers, in terms of macros, but also its nutritional value, its satiety index, in terms of how it makes you feel. How do you feel digestively? How do you feel from a satiety and appetite regulation perspective? These are all tools that are not going to just serve you during this fat loss phase or during your reverse diet phase or whatever it may be. It's going to serve you for life. So if you invest time now, I always think about it like this. Think about how we look into financial investing. If we invest into mutual funds or whatever it may be early in life, they pay off later in life. So the earlier we do these things, it's just muscle is an investment. So I've always thought about it. Listen, I wanted to build as much muscle as possible early on in my life so I could just live off that the rest of my life, because muscle is metabolic currency. So I've had great insulin sensitivity, glucose regulation. It's helped with so many things in terms of my cognitive health, my memory retention, all these different things. That was an investment I made early on in my life. As a teenager, decided to start training, and I'm always going to do. But now, we all three of us know that there are times in our life where life is really stressful, and we can go down to a minimum effective dose, a minimum effective volume, and essentially maintain with a far lower amount of training than was needed to build that tissue. However, if we had never put in that work off the jump, when I was in the gym 6 days a week for 2 hours a day and just slamming to myself, not that that was the most effective approach, I will say that. However, I put the time in, I made the investment, and now I could kick back if need be, if life circumstances and business and family and all these different things come up and I don't have the time to devote as much as I would like to. The same thing with tracking. We put this work in off the bat. I went to more physiology and nutritional biochemistry courses than anyone wants to know. I invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into this. If I needed to, I could get away with not tracking. However, I will say that a lot of times what I can do, what Jeff can do, what Jeremiah can do, it's not conducive for what someone out in the audience that doesn't have our experience should do or can do. And we wouldn't suggest that because that would be misleading for you and it would just lead you to frustration. So this is really where, as educators, as leaders in the space, we have to differentiate and put some context behind things and say, listen, I know you're hearing all of this on social media. You're hearing about the pull arounds and this optimizing this biomechanical setup, as well as utilizing a simpler diet and utilizing intuitive eating for fat loss. Don't always believe what you hear. A lot of things that are common, they almost seem like common knowledge, but really common knowledge could mislead you as much as common sense, because common sense isn't that common these days. And so really when it comes down to it, you have to think about things in the context of who I am. What is my history with dieting? Do I have a poor relationship with food? Where should I really be intuitive eating? Because right now I've been eating by my hunger and satiety signals, but they're always skewed. So I'm always overly hungry, and I always find myself that at the end of the day, I end up binge eating. Because always during the early part of the day, I restrict myself because I want to get into that deficit. I want to effectively lose fat loss. But what I notice is my appetite, my hunger regulation is off by the end of the evening, and I get stressed at work. And by the time I get home, I always end up veering off the handle and off the rails, and I eat much more than I anticipated. And then I feel guilt as a result. And the next day I start the cycle all over again. Or I'm the person that diets Monday through Friday, but on the weekends, I just let go because I'm stressed and I feel over restricted. And that's another form of intuitive eating. Because within all the constructs of intuitive eating, it is going by hunger signals. It is unconditional permission to eat. That's great for a weight neutral approach. But if you guys are out there looking to lose body fat and really optimize your body composition, we have to take more of a strategic approach to optimize that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, you summed that up great. And again, we ended up getting to less topics than I wanted. Jared, did you have anything you wanted to follow up on or anything on that topic?
I don't.
Cool. As always, boys, it was another great episode. We have questions left over. I think we probably have 30 questions just sitting there left over.
There's two really good ones. The one about training, the comparison between physique competitors and lifestyle clients, and then also the muscle gain. Let's definitely get those two on next podcast.
Yep, I'll save those and bold them out. So cool. Anything else before you guys want to let the audience know or share anything before we hop off for today? Cool. I guess next time we chat, Jared, it's going to be close to your wedding. We'll be closer to mine. So we have that going on. We'll probably touch base again soon. And we'll again appreciate everybody listening. And we'll talk to you guys next time.